You are unlovable. I wouldn't even match you with the least single woman on my roster. Nobody in the boardroom moved an inch. Violet had just informed the most feared man in Seoul that he lacked the basic ability to be loved in front of the people who fear him. 40 floors high above Seoul, in an executive office built to make powerful men feel powerful, Violet Clarke, curvy and unbothered, had just told Hwang Chan-woo, to his face, that he was unlovable. Then the woman at the head of the table folded her hands and told Violet exactly who she had been assessing. You can imagine the expression on her face. Hwang Chan-woo was not a difficult billionaire. He was the chairman-in-waiting of the Hanjo Group, the man whose signature moved markets and emptied rooms, the single name in that tower that everyone from the doorman to the board spoke a little more softly. Then she braced herself, expecting an explosion, but it never came. Chan-woo leaned forward, and something changed behind his eyes that even his executives had plainly never seen, because two of them actually took a step back. "Give me 30 days, he said. Violet blinked. "For what?" "To prove you wrong. Find me one woman I will want to see twice." His gaze held hers, level and unhurried. "And I will prove you wrong. If you love a story where the woman everyone in the room underestimates turns out to be the only one telling the truth, then get comfortable. Like this video, subscribe, and tell me in the comments where you're watching from today, because this one goes somewhere nobody in that boardroom saw coming." Violet Clarke had delivered worse verdicts than this one. In 11 years of doing what she did, she had told a shipping heir that he treated first dates like tax audits. She had told a famous plastic surgeon that correcting a woman's Korean before the second course was the reason there was never a third course. She had once looked a man worth 9 figures in the eye and explained, kindly, that a person who checks his phone during your answer is telling you, your answer doesn't matter. She was not in the business of flattering rich men. She was in the business of the truth, because true love is always built on truth. She had built her whole quiet empire on it. Clarke & Co. was 2 rooms above a tea house in Bukchon, a leather couch, a good kettle, and a reputation that moved by whisper through the families who ran the country. Violet did not sell access to beautiful people. Anyone with money could buy that. She sold something rarer, the ability to sit across from a person and see, with almost frightening accuracy, exactly why the last 3 relationships had ended, and whether the next one had a prayer. The elite of Seoul came to her the way they came to no one else, honestly, because she gave them no other option. She had learned to be fearless the hard way, and she did not talk about it, but it lived under everything she did. Before Seoul, before the couch and the kettle and the whispers, there had been a man named Grant back in Chicago, who loved her the way a collector loves a rare thing, completely, and on the condition that it never change. He had improved her. He had a gentle word for every part of her he wanted smaller. Her laugh was too loud for the rooms he liked. Her opinions were charming until they were inconvenient. By the end of 2 years, she had gotten so good at folding herself down that she could no longer find the parts she had put away. It took her a long time and a hard, ugly year to unpack them all. When she finally did, she made herself one promise, and she had never broken it. She would never again make herself smaller so that a powerful man could feel comfortable. And she wore color every single day to remember it, in a city that had decided long ago that women who wanted to be taken seriously should disappear into gray. So when Chairwoman Hwang Mi-suk, silver, elegant, and shrewd as a card sharp, had called Clarke & Co. and asked her to assess the compatibility of her son, Violet had said yes, without knowing that the assessment would take place in a boardroom, or that her subject would spend the first half of it trying to run the meeting she had been hired to run about him. She should have known something was strange when the chairwoman insisted the first session happen at the company, but Violet had a rule about that too. She liked to see people in the room where they were most themselves. And Hwang Chan-woo, it turned out, was most himself at the head of a table, dismantling the person across from him for information. Now he sat there with the whole thing turned around on him, and instead of anger, there was that unnerving, focused interest, the look of a man who had just found a variable his equations did not account for. Violet considered revising her wording. She did not consider revising her conclusion. So, he steepled his fingers. Does knowing who I am change your assessment? No, she said. Behind him, the chairwoman smiled into her tea. Violet should have walked out. Any sane consultant would have taken the retainer, wished the family well, and never returned. Instead, she found herself extending her hand across the glass, because underneath the control and the suspicion and the truly intimidating amount of power in that room, she had noticed one small thing, and Violet Clarke noticed small things for a living. He had not gotten angry when she challenged him. He had gotten interested. That meant there was something in there to work with. 30 days, she agreed. Chan-woo took her hand. His grip was cool and certain, and he held her gaze a half-second longer than a handshake required. And Violet had the distinct, inconvenient feeling of a door opening somewhere she had not given anyone permission to walk through. She had no idea that finding him a woman would be the easy part. The hard part was going to be him. By the third day, she understood exactly what she was dealing with, because Hwang Chan-woo approached romance the way he approached a hostile acquisition. I'll need complete profiles, he said, on the morning she came to his office to begin. Family background, financial exposure, prior relationships, anything that constitutes a liability. No, said Violet. He looked up from his desk, a slab of black stone the size of a small boat, and Violet had already begun the useful process of becoming immune to that look. How exactly am I meant to evaluate these women? She set her notebook on the desk between them. Worn brown leather, soft at the corners. The only unpolished thing in the entire building. By meeting them. That's inefficient. That's dating. There should be a meaningful difference. There is. In an acquisition, asking a woman whether she wants children before the appetizers arrive is called aggressive due diligence. On a date, it's called never getting a second one. She flipped the notebook open to a fresh page. You don't get files. You get to be a person in a room with another person, which I understand is new for you. Sung-ho, the chief operating officer standing quietly by the window, made a sound that he turned into a cough. Chan-woo ignored him. Then I'm to walk in with no information. You're to walk in curious instead of armed. Now. She uncapped her pen. What makes you laugh? He stared at her, as though she'd asked him to conjugate a color. Is that relevant? The fact that you can't answer it is becoming relevant. I laugh. Wonderful. At what? The silence went on a beat too long. Violet wrote something down. What did you write? Confidential. It's an assessment of me, and you're not getting it. She looked up, mild as milk. When did you last apologize to someone? I apologize when I'm wrong. When were you last wrong? He paused. Violet lowered her pen very slowly, the way you lower a cup when you don't want to spill it. Oh, she said. Oh dear, I've been wrong. Recently. Define recently, she wrote again. His eyes tracked the pen like it was a weapon. That was the shape of it. Those first 2 weeks. She would not give him dossiers, so he tried to acquire the information another way. Through her. Every question she asked, he tried to redirect. Every answer she wrote, he demanded to see. He was, she thought, the single most controlling human being she had ever consulted, and she had once worked with a man who alphabetized his houseplants. And yet, when a young server at the cafe, where they met, spilled tea across Chan-woo's $10,000 sleeve and went white with terror, Chan-woo did not raise his voice. He did not even look up from the document he was reading. He simply said, without heat, "It's only a jacket. Bring another cloth for yourself. You're shaking," and went back to his page, and the boy nearly wept with relief. Violet caught it. She caught the way the room feared him, and the way he never once used that fear when it cost him nothing to be kind. She wrote a single word in the notebook and did not let him see it, and this time it was not a joke. Then she started making introductions, because that was the job. The first woman was accomplished and lovely, and asked more questions about his properties than about him. He declined a second meeting, and Violet, honestly, could not argue. The second agreed with everything he said. He declined her too. "No one agrees with everything I say," he told Violet, with such flat certainty that she put her pen down. "That," she said, "may be the most self-aware sentence you have ever produced." The third one he ended before the entree, because he watched her speak to the restaurant's hostess like the woman was furniture, and Violet didn't challenge it, because that one had bothered her for the same reason. She had expected him to reject women for being not beautiful enough, not connected enough, not polished enough. He barely mentioned any of it. He noticed character. He noticed it hardest when people thought no one important was watching. That complicated her assessment. Not enough to regret it. Enough to make her curious. The debriefs started running long. 15 minutes became 30. 30 became an hour. And somewhere in there the meeting stopped being about the women he'd met and started being about people. Why they lied. Why they performed. Why the ones who wanted love most were so often the worst at receiving it. Violet discovered that under all that suspicion was a mind that never stopped watching, that had catalogued 1,000 human tells and trusted not one of them. And Chan-woo discovered that Violet could read a room without needing to own it, which he had genuinely believed was impossible. She explained the difference between being needed and being loved, between someone respecting your power and someone merely afraid of it. He listened. He actually listened, which Violet privately marked down as his most dramatic improvement, because in her experience, men like Hwang Chan-woo had two settings: talking and waiting to talk. Then his questions changed. "Why did you become a matchmaker?" he asked one evening when the tea had gone cold and neither of them had noticed. She glanced up. "That has nothing to do with your compatibility. You ask me personal questions constantly. I'm paid to. I could pay you more." "No." A small smile touched his mouth, and Violet stopped, because she had not meant to make him do that. "There," he said. "That. You say no so easily. Almost no one does. Almost no one has told you to your face in a boardroom that you can't be loved." He laughed. It was quiet and quick, and it was gone before it fully arrived. But it was real, and it did something to the room, and it did something worse to Violet, who liked the sound far more than a professional should. She dropped her eyes to the notebook. She wrote, "Found the answer to question 1. She did not let him see it. And she told herself, firmly, that noticing a client's laugh was simply thorough work. By the third week, she stopped asking why Chan-woo rejected women, and started asking what would make him keep one. So one evening she turned to a clean page and tried a new approach. "Describe her," she said, "the woman you actually want. Since apparently I can't find her, tell me who she is. I thought that was your job. My job would be considerably easier if my client stopped rejecting everyone I sent him." He leaned back. She lifted her pen. "Independent," he said. "Yes, but loyal, obviously. Confident, but kind. Those aren't contradictions. I didn't say they were." Her face said otherwise. "She should have her own opinions," he went on. "Even the inconvenient ones, especially those. She shouldn't be impressed by money. It eliminates a startling percentage of the women who agree to date me, and I'd like them eliminated. She should be comfortable enough with what my name means not to be afraid of it. and she should be kind when there's nothing in it for her. He paused. Anyone can be gracious to someone useful. I care how a person treats the ones who can do nothing for them. Violet had stopped writing. He noticed, because he noticed everything. What? Nothing. You're doing that thing, where you find something and pretend you haven't. I'm documenting your increasingly impossible standards, she said, and resumed writing, and did not look at him, because the woman he had just described, every line of her, from the color she wore to the way she treated the boy who spilled the tea, was sitting on his leather couch holding a pen, and Violet was not ready to look at that, so she didn't. Across the office, Chairwoman Hwang set down her cup with the smallest possible click. She had begun attending the debriefs under the innocent pretext of protecting her investment. She said almost nothing. She didn't need to. Her gaze moved once from her son to Violet, and then to the notebook lying open between them, and she smiled the smile of a woman, watching a plan she had made weeks ago arrive precisely on schedule. The trouble arrived in the shape of Andre Hollis. Andre was an architect from back home, warm and easy, and genuinely kind, a former client whose last relationship had ended so amicably that they still sent each other memes. He was in Seoul for a hotel project, and he had run into Violet outside a gallery, and he had said, grinning, the thing he always said, "You know, somebody really ought to match the matchmaker." Violet had laughed, and Hwang Chan-woo, arriving for their meeting, had heard exactly that much. His attention moved from Violet to Andre and back with the specific, cold interest he usually reserved for information he considered potentially dangerous. Introductions were made. Chan-woo was perfectly, flawlessly polite. Somehow that made it worse. Later, in the office, he opened her file and did not look at it. "How long was Grant your client?" Violet's pen stopped. For a disorienting second, she thought he meant the other Grant, the one she never said aloud. "Excuse me?" "Alice, the architect. I know which man you mean." She set the pen down. "Why?" "Professional curiosity. My profession or yours?" Silence. She nearly smiled. He tried again, and she watched him do it. Watched the most powerful man in Seoul attempt to reverse engineer the information out of her, because he could not simply demand it. Is a consultant permitted to date former clients? That's an unusually specific question for a man I'm supposed to be marrying off. It's a reasonable one. It has nothing to do with finding you a partner. That, he said, depends. On what? He seemed to realize there was no version of that sentence that would help him, so he stopped, and Violet leaned back and enjoyed the sight of one of the most feared men in the country, choosing silence over the humiliation of admitting he was jealous. She should have found it purely funny. Instead, warmth moved through her chest, unbidden and unwelcome, and that was far more dangerous than anything he had said. Because the problem was no longer whether Hwang Chan-woo was capable of wanting someone. She had proven that he was. The problem, sitting in her chest like a coal, was that he might already want her, and that the wanting was, God help her, mutual. "Do not run a background check on Andre," she said. "I haven't said I would. You didn't have to." Then Violet found the perfect woman, and everything she had been refusing to look at came due. Sim Jisoo was 37, a gallerist who split her time between Seoul and New York, and she was, on paper and in person, almost exactly what Chan-woo had described. She understood wealth without worshipping it. She understood power without pretending it didn't exist. She could disagree without turning the disagreement into a contest to prove she was strong. She was warm and self-possessed and entirely unafraid of the Hanjo name, and when Violet introduced them, their first meeting ran 3 hours, and Chan-woo did not leave early, and he did not send Violet a single irritated message, and afterward, he gave her the exact answer she had spent a month trying to pull out of him. I have no objection to seeing her again." Violet should have felt triumphant. It was the whole assignment, delivered. Instead, something in her went quiet and cold, and she covered it with the smoothest professional smile she owned. "Good," she said. He was watching her too closely. "That's all? You've spent a month insisting I'm impossible. I said difficult. You said unlovable. Technically, I said I wouldn't match you with anyone on my roster. Jisoo isn't on my roster. I recruited her specifically after revising your criteria." Her voice was perfectly even. She was proud of that. "See where it goes. That's what you hired me for." She started leaving the debriefs earlier after that. She stopped lingering when the conversation drifted away from the work. When he asked personal questions, she redirected them, and when he watched her too long, she pretended not to notice. And Chan-woo, who noticed everything, noticed all of it, and so did Jisoo. It came to a head at a gallery opening, one of those elegant Seoul evenings where the whole room is quietly taking attendance. Violet was explaining something about compatibility, and Chan-woo, listening, corrected a small detail, and without thinking Violet corrected him back. And the exchange was so easy, so worn in, so obviously the 1000th version of a thing they did all the time, that Chan-woo almost smiled before she'd even finished. Jisoo watched them the way a woman watches something she has already decided about. Later she found Violet by the window, 2 glasses of wine, and her voice was gentle, and it did not waver. "May I ask you something no one seems willing to ask?" Violet already knew. "Are you still able to be objective about him?" The room seemed quieter than it was. "Why would you ask me that?" Violet said. And it was not a denial, and they both knew it. "Because you know he's irritated before he opens his mouth. Because he looks for your reaction whenever anyone says something he finds funny. And because you have spent the entire evening being very careful not to look at him whenever he looks at me." Jisoo said it without cruelty, which somehow made it worse. "You're being paid to help him choose a wife, so I have to ask. If you've fallen for your own client, how can I, or any woman you bring him, trust that the process is honest?" There it was. Not jealousy dressed up as a question. An actual, fair, unanswerable question. And Violet knew the answer, because she had known it for a week, and had simply refused to hold it in the light. She had gone cold and quiet when he agreed to see Jisoo again. She had been leaving early because watching the assignment succeed had started to physically hurt. She had fallen for the one man in Seoul she had been hired, and paid, and professionally sworn to give away. Chan-woo had drifted close enough to hear the last of it. "Jisoo." "No," Violet said, and he stopped, because she had never once in a month let his power finish a sentence for her, and she was not going to start now, standing in the wreckage of her own integrity. She turned to Jisoo. "You're right to ask, and you deserve a straight answer, so here it is. My judgment about this man is compromised, which means I can no longer do this job." She set her wine down. "I'm resigning." "No," Chan-woo said. "You don't get to reject my resignation. I can end the contract. We are not in agreement. We don't have to be." She made herself look at him, and it cost more than she let show. "If you choose Jisoo, it should be because you want Jisoo. If you choose someone else, it should be because you want her. Not because the woman advising you got tangled up in the answer." She picked up her bag. "That's the whole reason your mother hired someone honest. So be honest with yourself. You don't need me for that part. And if I don't want you to leave." The question nearly took her knees out from under her. She had spent a month teaching this man to ask for what he actually wanted, and of course, the first thing he asked for plainly was the one thing she could not give him and stay whole. "That," she said quietly, "is exactly why I have to." She walked out before he could turn it into something easier. She did not ask him to follow. She did not ask him to choose. For the first time since the wager began, Hwang Chan-woo was completely free to decide what he wanted, and Violet was no longer standing there to help him find it. For 3 days, there was nothing at all standing between Chan-woo and Sim Ji-soo. That was the logical conclusion, and Chan-woo was, above all things, a logical man. Ji-soo was intelligent and composed and impeccable. She understood his world. She would never be overwhelmed by the rooms he walked into, or the weight attached to his name. On paper, she was the best match Violet Clarke had ever produced. And that was precisely the problem, because Chan-woo no longer cared what worked on paper. Violet had spent 30 days curing him of it. She had made him sit with questions he'd spent a lifetime dismissing as beneath him. What did he value when the money was subtracted out? Who could disagree with him without turning it into a war? What kind of woman could see exactly what his name meant and still speak, plainly, to the man carrying it? Could stand in a boardroom full of people trained to fear him and tell him the truth, with her whole chest, and not flinch? Every road led to the same place. Not because Violet had shaped herself to fit his list, because his list had rewritten itself, quietly, as he came to know her. Or, he thought, standing at the black slab of his desk at 2 in the morning, because for the first time in his life, the list had simply become honest. He ended it with Ji-soo the next morning, cleanly and without cowardice. He did not invent a flaw to make it easier. You were never the problem, he told her. Ji-soo understood before he finished. No, she said, with a small, wry grace. I don't think I was. There was no scene, no wounded pride, only the plain recognition that being compatible and being chosen are not the same thing. And then, Hwang Chan-woo did something no one who knew him would have believed. He went to Violet, alone. No convoy of black cars filling her narrow street in Bukchon. No assistant sent ahead. No gift the size of a small country. No offer disguised as an order. He climbed the stairs above the tea house himself and knocked on the door of Clarke & Co. like an ordinary man. And when Violet opened it, her face closed like a shop at nightfall. If you've come to talk me into coming back, she said, the answer is no. I haven't. That stopped her. He stood in the doorway of the 2 small rooms, the leather couch, the good kettle, the whole modest kingdom she had built with her own 2 hands, after a man in another country had spent 2 years teaching her to want less. And Hwang Chan-woo, who had never in his life walked into a room he didn't own, waited to be invited into hers. You succeeded, he said. She frowned. With Ji-soo, Chan-woo. No. Something in his voice made her go still. You said you could find one woman I genuinely wanted to see twice. You did. Understanding arrived slowly, and resistance arrived right behind it. Don't. The woman who argued with every answer I gave, he said, who refused me files I had no right to see, who told me, in my own boardroom, in front of my own people, that I couldn't be loved, and then didn't take it back when she found out who I was. He didn't move closer. He simply stood there and said it. The one who kept insisting she wasn't a candidate, the humor she used as armor, deserted her completely. For a long moment, neither of them moved. Then Violet asked the question that mattered more than any of it, the one she had carried out of a different city years ago and never once set down. Do you want me because I challenged you? She said. Because if that's all this is, I've done this before. Eventually, the challenging stops being fascinating and starts being inconvenient. Eventually, a man like you decides the parts of me that don't fit would be so much easier if they were smaller. Her voice held steady, but barely. I built this whole life out of the pieces the last one made me put away. I am not going to hand them to someone with more money than God and let him decide which ones I'm allowed to keep. A month ago, Chan-woo would have answered that by listing everything he could provide. Security, access, protection, resources she could not spend in 10 lifetimes. Instead, he stood in her doorway and understood, at last, the real question underneath hers. Would he love her, or would he absorb her? "I don't want to make you smaller," he said. "I don't want to move you somewhere more convenient, or fold your work into mine, or decide which parts of your life are permitted to stay." He said it slowly, like a man laying down weapons one at a time. "I spent my whole life certain I needed a woman who could fit into my world." He paused. "You're the one who taught me to ask whether I could fit into someone else's." Violet did not trust herself to speak. "I don't need you to become part of the Hanjo group," Chan-woo said, and his voice was steady, and for the first time there was nothing guarded left in it at all. "I'm asking permission to become part of this." He looked around the 2 small rooms. "Whatever it is, however small it looks from where I usually stand, I'm asking, and I'll wait for the answer, however long it takes, because I finally understand. That's the only kind of yes worth having." And then Hwang Chan-woo, who had never once in his life waited for anyone, held out his hand and did the single most difficult thing a man like him could do. He waited. Violet looked at the open hand. The last time it had been offered to her, they'd been strangers sealing a wager across a sheet of glass, and she had taken it not knowing it would upend her entire life. This time, she knew exactly what she was taking. She knew the shape of him now, the control, and the loneliness under it, the kindness he only spent when no one important was watching, the boy who touched his father's watch when the world got too close. She knew the risk with her eyes wide open, which is the only honest way to take one. She put her hand in his. "You realize," she said, "this is technically the worst possible outcome for my success statistics." "Why?" "My client rejected every single woman I introduced." His mouth curved, the full smile now, the one she'd spent 30 days mining out of solid rock. Not every woman. Months later, Violet Clarke was still running Clarke & Co., exactly as she had before Hwang Chan-woo climbed her stairs. Her name was still on the door. Her clients were still her own. And Chan-woo had learned, slowly and imperfectly, that loving an independent woman did not mean quietly reorganizing her life until it fit conveniently inside his. He was still powerful. He was still, on his worst days, impossible. He had simply learned to recognize the places where control had no business being, and intimacy was the largest of them. She was in the middle of an intake meeting one afternoon. A new client, wealthy, single, and irritatingly handsome, when Chan-woo arrived unannounced and clocked all 3 of those facts in under a second. Violet watched him clock them. When the client left, Chan-woo watched the door close. "How long will you be working with him?" Violet set down her cold-blooded little notebook. "Chan-woo, it's a reasonable question. So was asking whether Andre Hollis had a criminal record. I never asked that. You considered it." Silence. Violet smiled. "You understand this job requires me to sit in small rooms with single men and ask them personal questions. I understand it completely." He straightened his cuff. "I don't like it." She laughed, bright and loud. The laugh a man in another country had once told her was too much for the rooms he liked. Chan-woo, who liked it precisely because it filled a room, said nothing at all. Because a year ago, that answer would have started a war, and now he simply admitted the truth and let it be true. Progress, she had learned, came in strange forms. "Would you like me," she said, reaching for the notebook, "to run a fresh compatibility assessment? I have new data." His face did something wonderful. "Absolutely not." "Are you sure? I could update your file." "Under no circumstances." She laughed harder, and he watched her do it, and neither of them minded the silence that came after. 30 days earlier, Violet Clarke had stood in a glass boardroom 40 floors above Seoul, and told the most feared man in the country, in front of everyone paid to fear him, that he could not be loved. She had been right, and she had the strangest possible proof of it. He never chose a single woman on her roster. He never wanted the ones who were impressed, or the ones who agreed, or even the one who was perfect. He chose the one woman who had never been a candidate at all, the one who refused to shrink, who wore violet in a city of gray, who told him the truth and then dared him to earn her. Because the thing about people we're quick to call cold, or difficult, or impossible to love, is that most of them are not asking to be adored. They are waiting, quietly and without much hope, for one person brave enough to tell them the truth and stay in the room afterward. Chan-woo had spent his whole life certain that the closer someone got, the more they wanted to take. It took a woman who wanted nothing from him but honesty to show him the difference between being held and being owned. If Violet and Chan-woo's story warmed something in you tonight, do me a kindness before you go. Like this video. Share it with someone who has ever been told to make themselves smaller to be loved. And subscribe to the channel so the next story finds you. And tell me in the comments where you're watching from. Because the bravest thing any of us ever does is refuse to fold ourselves down and then wait, with our whole hearts, for the person who loves us at full size.